day. We welcome you all and happy to have you here. I'm hoping that for today's event, you're all able to, get some great information, tips, and advice from some of our Latinas in leadership roles. So we're going to go ahead and get started for today's event. And first of all, we just kind of want to go over the agenda. So for today's agenda, we'll go over some housekeeping. We'll introduce the panelists. Then we'll go into the career panel where we will have a few facilitated questions to ask the panelists. Then we'll open it up for some questions from you all, our participants and students, and then close the event and then do a quick overview of the SJSU Career Center and how we can further support you with your career development and goals. All right, so just to go over some housekeeping, we will be sharing in the in the chat feature, our Google form, and we do ask that you please complete that prior to leaving today's event. This will help us track attendance. We'll be sharing that throughout today's event, so please keep an eye out for that in the chat box. And again, make sure you complete that. If you have to leave today's session earlier, make sure you complete that form. We do ask that you all please turn off your audio, especially during the kind of career panel session, so we're not picking up any kind of other noise or distractions. And then we are asking that you please type any questions that you may have for the panelists in the chat box as well. And during the student Q&A section, our moderator will read those out loud. If you do have a question that you want addressed to a specific panelist, please make sure you indicate that when you post your question in the chat box. Otherwise, if it's for all, then you can just kind of keep it open-ended. All right, so moving along.
So thank you everyone once again for joining us this afternoon in our Latinas in Leadership event. And I have the honor of introducing some of our panelists this afternoon. And this is definitely a wonderful collaboration that has happened and made possible in part by our partnership with the Student Involvement Office, as well as the Career Center and the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center. And this is one of our Latinx Heritage Month events. So we are just really excited to have all of you here and participate as we celebrate the contributions of, especially here, of our Latinas in our community. And so I just want to give a thank you and a shout out to Dylan from Student Involvement, who has helped spearhead this event, as well as Elisa Aquino, who's the Centro's program coordinator, myself, Lily Pinedo-Giangay, who serves as the program director for the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center, and lastly to Sandra de Leon from the Career Center. And I will go ahead and introduce our first panelist, who is Teresa Castellanos. Teresa has worked with the diversity of immigrant communities for over 30 years. She began her career as a labor organizer with Justice for Janitors and the Health Workers Union. She worked for Catholic Charities Immigration Program, leading the organization's citizenship efforts in the mid-1990s. For the past 23 years, she has been a guiding force behind the Santa Clara County's citizenship and immigrant integration programs. Though her efforts in collaboration with community-based agencies and other colleagues, 133,000 county residents have received assistance in their citizenship process. She's a contributing author to Bridging Borders in Silicon Valley and Kin, Knowledge of Immigrant Nationalities, 2 books based on the data from the Summit on Immigrant Needs and Contributions, as well as the recent Office of Human Relations report, A Tale of Two Valleys, The Price We Pay for Living in Santa Clara County. Thank you so much, Teresa, for joining us this afternoon.
Today we also have Rosanna Alvarez. Rosanna Alvarez is a multidisciplinary artist, writer, and social entrepreneur who lives poetically while sharing her life lessons as an educator, speaker, and consultant. She is the co-founder of the East Side magazine and the creator of Hella Chingona podcast. Her life's work is grounded in her mission to embrace personal power through creative inspiration, which is what inspired her to found Citlali Rose, a brand committed to elevating culture, Chicana feminisms, and intergenerational conversations through art. She is also a danzante with Kalupuli, Itzkali, and Rosanna, you can correct me if I mispronounced it. And she currently serves on the boards of Yoali and La Raza Historical Society of Santa Clara Valley. And you can find her IG public profiles at Heart of Rosanna and at Hela Chingona Podcast.
Our third panelist for this afternoon is Yulianna Ortega. Yulianna Ortega is the STEM Diversity Programs Director at UC Santa Cruz, an office that's dedicated to supporting the development of future scientists and leaders. As the daughter of a farm worker, she migrated between Santa Cruz and Oaxaca, Mexico until the age of 12. For her work, Yulianna has been recognized by the 2017 Chancellor's Achievement Award for Diversity and the 2020 UC Santa Cruz Outstanding Staff Award. The accomplishments of the STEM Diversity Office have been recognized in the 2020 Insight to Diversity magazine for having mentored over 1,200 students across the disciplines of STEM. In addition, she has been the SACNAS chapter advisor since 2010, and the chapter received the 2018 SACNAS Chapter of the Year award. Yulianna believes that many talented individuals are hidden in the communities that are not traditionally represented in STEM, and she is honored to work with the most amazing human beings with the most impressive talents. Thank you so much, Yulianna, for being here with us this afternoon.
And our fourth panelist for today is Cecilia Chavez. Cecilia Chavez is a community organizer with Silicon Valley Debug. Cecilia is a DACA recipient who has been doing community organizing work for the past 9 years. She completed her bachelor's degree in Justice Studies in 2012, as well as a master's program in the Mexican American Studies Department in 2016, both at San Jose State University. She first got involved in community organizing when her father was detained by ICE back in 2008. And they had to rally to beat his deportation case. As an impacted family member, she understands the hardships that our community go through with entanglement of the criminal and immigration system. Her work consists of supporting families who are impacted by the criminal, immigration, juvenile, and justice systems. Through participatory defense, families and communities are empowered to impact the outcome of cases and transform the landscape of power in the court system. Gracias, Cecilia, for joining us today.
And now I have the pleasure of introducing our panel discussion moderator for this afternoon. So Sandra de Leon. Sandra de Leon is our career counselor for diverse students here at San Jose State University. She received her bachelor's degree from UC Santa Cruz in cultural anthropology and her master's degree in counselor education from San Jose State University. As a first-generation college student, she struggled to figure out what she wanted to major in and what career she wanted to pursue. As a career counselor, she's here to support our students with their career development needs and challenges. When she's not at work, she enjoys going to concerts, hiking, and traveling. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us this afternoon and for being our moderator for this panel discussion. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lily. Glad to be here. Of course, some of the things I enjoy, I've had to modify with our current shelter in place, but still finding things that I enjoy doing, and glad to be here with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here to kind of, or I guess I'll just go into the questions that I have here pulled up. So I'll start with our first question for our panelists. And I'm going to open this question up for all of our panelists that would like to kind of answer this question. I know that there might be some similar shared experiences maybe when answering this first question. So if you have someone else that maybe shares something similar, feel free if you want to pass this question, or if there's something additional you would like to add. So my first question to our panelist here is, tell us about your undergraduate experience. Specifically, did you identify as a first-generation student, college student? If so, can you share challenges you may have encountered and how you overcame these challenges? So I'll kind of open it up and see here if any of our panelists, either you want to raise your physical or virtual hand if you want to kind of answer that question, and we'll kind of go from there. Rosanna, I see your hand.
My little waving hand. So I was first identified as a first-generation college student before I even knew that there was language for that. And that came about by way of folks who were either trying to make sure that I was on a direct pathway, not just to get to college, but to graduate, right? And so for me, going from East San Jose to Santa Clara University, I didn't go very far, and I lived at home during that time, right? And so I thought, I'm gonna start college and I'm gonna do the thing, and I already know how to be a busybody and succeed in school. While college was a whole different mitote, right? And in terms of getting my family to understand what that expectation meant for me was a struggle in itself. As much as they wanted me to succeed, they didn't understand the context of what certain things meant. And certain things that weren't just me going to class and doing my homework, but what it meant to be a successful college student. And so one of the things that I really valued about my own time as a student way back when was that there were so many other mentors, right, on college campuses. And I think that we gravitate to folks that we identify with. And it was a beautiful thing going through that particular school at that time, because it was predominantly white, and knowing that there were people who were saying we're trying to support first generation college students, and that they weren't just, you know, assuming that there were things we didn't know, but that they were assuming that there were things we knew really well, and that those were going to serve us really well in this space. And so the way that that conversation was had was so different, and we got to be a part of forming like what that meant, right? To the point where, you know, students themselves were being asked to share their own stories, not just with other students, but with other campuses también, and with high school students, to get them ready before they got into that culture shock space. And so the beautiful thing about spaces like San Jose State, now I'm on the flip side of that, is when students are taking my courses, I acknowledge that from the very beginning, and I let them know I was a first generation college student, because that automatically lets people know that they can ask any question, and no question is going to sound like a dumb question, because facts, we don't know the ins and outs. And even though I teach here, there are things that I'm like, I don't even know that, right? And I think it's a beautiful thing when folks who you perceive to be your mentors or, you know, your professors, when they're able to be human in that way. And I think that it's an open part of my story for that same reason.
I was muted there. Thank you, Rosanna, for sharing. I think definitely, like you mentioned, letting people know, sometimes even, you know, your background, that you yourself are a first generation college student, can sometimes open that conversation for others to maybe share some of their own struggles or obstacles. I see Cecilia's hand.
Yes, so for me, some of the challenges that I faced, or even as a label of first generation college student, I come from the East Side as well. And I kind of had come to terms with my immigration identity when I was like, I mean, I've always known I've been undocumented. Like that's always been like forefront in my, you know, walk in life. And I know that's limited, like or that's really shaped the way I've seen some stuff and how I've walked in life. And in high school, I really came to terms like college isn't going to be for me because there's no way my parents are going to pay for it. or have, not that they wouldn't, but it's just having the resources to do it. And it wasn't until one of the counselors was like, look, and the only thing available at that time was AB, what is it, 540, AB 540 back then, which allowed, the benefit was that it would give us in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition. But that's still like a chunky amount of money per semester, even at, even at San Jose State, back in, some years back. And through a lot of the hard work and a lot of the mentoring with the high school counselor, I started to break down those barriers that I had put on for myself, saying you're not going to go because, one, you're undocumented, you don't have the funds to do it. And I was, with her, we were able to raise enough scholarship money to help me walk through those first 2 years of college that allowed me to, work 3 jobs at a time to start saving up for those other school years that were coming up. I definitely I knew I was a first generation student, but I never really felt that I was a student because I've always had a lot of other, things in the back of my mind. I'm the 5th out of 7 children, the first one to graduate from high school and the first one to go to college. So there was, and even within my outer extended family, there was no one that had gone to college that was close to me that could give me that guidance. So a lot of these things I was learning as I was going on my own, because my parents, being monolingual, speaking with 2nd grade and 3rd grade education, weren't really able to do, to support me in any kind of those ways. I really limited my experience as being a student because of everything else that I had to focus on, work, being able to provide financial support for my family. So my experience as an undergraduate student was really limited by, all the other priorities that I had going on. I was later able to benefit from some of the label of first generation college student in terms of scholarships, but never really felt that college experience because of everything else that that's going on a daily basis.
Thank you, Cecilia, for sharing. And definitely, I think just from what you shared in your perspective, we kind of learned about also the different identities that each of us hold, right? It's not, at times it's, yes, maybe you might be a first generation college student, but you're also, a daughter helping your family with their financial responsibilities and trying to juggle school, work, along with those family responsibilities as well, or other identities that we might have as well. So thank you for sharing that experience. Yulianna, I saw your hand raised, so I'll go with you last here for this question, and then I'll move on to the next.
So most definitely, I learned about identifying as a first generation student as it was sort of time to apply to college. And this will date me, but when I was in high school, there was no email yet, right? So the internet was just starting up. So this it put us at a great disadvantage for those that were trying to seek the opportunities, right? Because it meant a lot of knocking doors and hearing of an opportunity and physically having to follow it, right? And so I think that one of the first things that I had to overcome was my shyness. I was a very shy and polite student and respectful. And so it always felt like I didn't want to bother anybody. But I sort of just kind of going through the motions of hearing that, college was out there and sort of wanting to find out more. It was, staying after class to talk to a teacher in high school. It was hearing about an opportunity to apply to a high school internship, which really was the game changer for me. And that sort of, so I was a participant of the 1999 Stanford Medical Youth Science Program. And so it was truly this program that really changed my route and made me aware of financial aid it made me aware that that there was fee waivers. So all these terminology, I did not even know. What is a fee waiver? A financial aid. It was sort of like, because, and I grew up in Santa Cruz, and so one of the things, so because I had a back and forth journey, I did kindergarten here at Westlake School, and I went back to Mexico. But I grew up in Mexico up till the age of 5. And then I did kindergarten here, went back and did 1st and 2nd. I came back for 3rd and went back to Mexico for 4th, 5th, and 6th. And so there was a sort of disconnect between me really feeling a part of an educational system early on, because this was a time where if you were in English as a second language learner, you were delegated to a small classroom setting, right, to work with a teacher's aide. So throughout my sort of journey here in the States, in this back and forth journey, I had a dual experience. I had the experience of feeling like the other because you were delegated to a teacher's aide. And when I would go back to Mexico, in my small town in Oaxaca, I was a part of the larger classroom. I had to, speed it up and learn what they were learning, or I knew that over there they can hold you back. So I kind of had to, speed up my game and learn it fast, or I would be held a grade back. And so I think in that sort of sense, because I kind of grew up with those two experiences, I felt like what it felt like being a part of the majority when you're actually included in these processes, and what it felt like to be like treated like the other. And so one of the things by my high school years, it was really overcoming that sense of shyness and coming to terms that there was times where I had to self-advocate, right? So one of the things that never happened for me is that I didn't have someone reach out to me and say, do you know your college, university, 4-year college university material? Like I had nobody tell me that. But after I had participated in this program, learning that language, financial aid, fee waivers, I came back with some demands, right? I came back to my counselor saying, hey, so I know that I'm eligible because I'm a low-income student and I qualify for fee waivers. And my counselor was a white man, Mr. Mayball. I'm really good with names. And he just was kind of thrown back like, oh, yeah, I guess you are, right? So I think early on, coming to terms with the support language that was out there, and really fostering that self-advocacy and really working through my shyness and being respectful, but still getting what I needed became really essential tool for me in identifying as a first-generation student in a time where information was not that accessible, right? And sort of being open to that sense of having to knock a door and saying, hey, can I talk to you about, I just found out about this information, and I want to know how I move forward with this, right? And I think that I see that in everyday life with my current students, right? When they get to a 4-year college setting, that they really struggle with, going to office hours, with, they don't feel like they can ask the faculty anything more because there's sort of this power differential. And so much of my time is really undoing some of this, right? It's saying, no, they get paid, and part of their pay is in the form of service. And actually they have to write letters of recommendation. It's written into one of the commitments that they do for students, right? And so I think for me, it's definitely, I did identify as a first-generation student. I also, the challenges were really overcoming, my self-insecurities and sort of making room for what I needed and advocating, which is something that continues to happen, right? And I know that that's probably the case for many of you students out there, right? That as you find out about something, you're like, you just have to follow the opportunity, you have to make way for yourself, right? Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Yulianna. I really appreciate that. I think you shared some really interesting, just your story of, that experience of being the majority and the other, and then, being in the education system in Oaxaca and then the US. That was really interesting to hear, as well as, not understanding at times how to navigate the school system. I know for me, I relate with the first time I had to do the FAFSA, I had no idea how to fill that out. And also just kind of what you mentioned, I think was really powerful about advocating for ourselves. I think a lot of the times, as you mentioned, even more so those of us that tend to be first-generation college students, but even those that are not, we shy away from asking for help, whether it's from our professors or, people in student services that are there to help us. And like you said, that is our job, their job, to help students. That's what we're there for. And then I found myself having to get comfortable also doing that, and now advocating for my parents who, you know, may not always be able to navigate the system and understand the English language as well. So thank you for sharing that experience. I'm going to go ahead and
Sandra Teresa Castellanos is on. I finally got on.
Oh,
I'm one
yes,
of the
I
panelists.
did see
Okay.
you, Teresa. Thank you. Glad to have you on. So I'm going to move on to our next question here, just because I do want to be mindful of time and make sure we have enough time for students' questions. And just as a quick reminder for any students that just logged on, make sure that you complete the Google request form that is being shared in the chat box, and that's for us to track attendance. If you have any question that comes up, please feel free to add that to the chat box as well. And if that question you wanted addressed to a specific panelist, make sure you indicate their name. So question number 2 here, I'm going to open it up for actually Teresa. I'll go here with you first. What are some practices that you gained as a student that have proven beneficial in your development as a professional and as a leader today?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry for being a little bit late at connectivity issues,
No
but I'm
worries.
here. I would say, and I just tell you a little bit of my background. I was a Spanish-speaking child in an English-only world. And of this panel, I'm probably the oldest on the panel. So when I started, there was no support for bilingual education in any way, shape, or form. I didn't learn how to read until 5th grade. And so finally I learned to read in 5th grade, and all of a sudden my life is transformed because I can actually participate in school. So what ends up happening is I read all our books in our little teeny tiny Horseman library, and I end up shifting from the way I'm being tracked to being college bound. And so in Peter Burnett, which is now Moek Maloney, I learned to read, I learned to get on the college track. At San Jose High, I'm on the college track the whole time. I only applied to one college because my father has a 3rd grade education, my mother has a 9th grade education, and the college counselor was actually a farm worker in the same town my mother had been in a farm worker. And so he says, I'll get your daughter into college. And because of him, I got into college. That was the only place I applied. And I will say, having been on the college track, I get to college and I realize in shock that I don't know how to read and write, period. I have not been prepared to be in college. My family has not prepared me to be in college. San Jose High lost a desegregation lawsuit a year after I graduated. So I get to UC Santa Cruz realizing, oh, I don't know how to read and write this way. And I end up getting on academic probation for the next 2 years as I struggled to learn how to be a good student. And it was a painful experience. And I remember opening every beginning of every quarter, we used to get letters there. So you opened your post office box, and my hands would shake from how scared I was at being in UC Santa Cruz again. But I also knew that coming back home and the abuse that we faced at home was harder than being in college. So I was going to keep going no matter what. And at UC Santa Cruz, they like to write a narrative for your grades instead of grades. And I always got told everything I did wrong and never told what I did right. And so I knew that I was not succeeding in school because my teachers were telling me, my professors were telling me at UC Santa Cruz, well, this is what she doesn't know how to do yet. And the thing that saved me in UC Santa Cruz was finding the Spanish for Spanish Speakers program, learning to read and write in Spanish, and realizing that my thought process had been stopped because I had not learned how to read and write in my native language. And that once I learned how to read and write in my native language, it began to flourish because I could actually think and make connections. So what that experience at UC Santa Cruz taught me, and I'll wrap it up fast because I know I'm talking a lot, is that number one, your culture is key to knowing who you are, to learning to advocate for yourself, and to empowering yourself. You have to be an empowered person to be able to advocate for yourself, number one. And number two, that in community we survive, in community we thrive. When we build that network of people who are going to support us, because it ended up being other students that taught me how to read and write. It ended other people who taught me, who tutored me to learn how to do what I needed to do. And I go from being on academic probation for 2 years to graduating with honors. And that was because I had support, some of it institutional, because people fought for that space for me, but a lot of it community-based and other students who figured stuff out and said, hey, bring this with you and do it this way. And that has taught me in my organizing that everything that we do in community is power. Gracias.
And I completely agree in what you said of, you know, being empowered helps us to advocate for ourselves, and also being part of a community just makes us stronger and able to, you know, also kind of overcome any challenges we may have. Thank you for that. And for the same question, I'm going to ask Cecilia to share any insights she may have, or, you know, any stories. So I'm just going to post the question here again. What are some practices that you gained as a student that have proven beneficial in your development as a professional and as a leader today?
Thank you. I mean, I can't stress that advocacy for yourself enough, as Teresa mentioned. You know, just on quickly on that note, like I was about to give up like my last semester because there was some miscalculations with the way my credits were calculated towards the end of my undergraduate work, because I was missing almost like a semester, quote unquote, missing almost a semester from my undergraduate work at State because there were some miscalculations. And I was at a point where it was like, I have to pay for another semester. That's like $4,500 I have to pay again, you know, to fix this issue. And what has helped me overcome that, because I was at a point where I was like, one, I can't afford it. You know, I can't afford, I was working 3 jobs at a time to just make ends meet on that end and pay my tuition and everything else. And what's one of the things that really helped is advocating for yourself, looking for those avenues that are going to help. Like one in that particular instance, like my thing was like, look, I'm just going to go to my minor's office, to the office of what was called Mexican American Studies. Now I think it's Chicana Studies or Chicana Studies. And I just sat down and I was like, I just need help with this. And I gravitated towards a professor there who I hadn't even taken, but she was there and she listened to me and became my mentor throughout my whole master's program as well. And so gravitating towards people and mentors that are going to help you guide and help advocate for you, you know, that's crucial in the educational career. And I mean, something, you know, practices that are proven to be, you know, good, you know, just good habits in when you're walking your life towards the career is just being organized. It's just being organized and learning how to multitask. And I know that might, you know, can become hard at times, but I think it's just allowing yourself spaces to think is important, but also forgiving yourself for not being able to do that. You know, it's very important because there's a lot of guilt that comes with, I'm not able to accomplish, you know, A, B, and C by today. And then you're beating yourself at that because you weren't able to accomplish it. But it's okay, you know, knowing that it's okay that you don't accomplish it, but you set goals for yourself for the next day, you know, is important. And taking it a day at a time, because being a student is overwhelming. Being a student today is overwhelming, you know, but then you're faced with everything else that life throws at you. Like, I don't know if folks have children, if folks have to work multiple jobs at a time, you know, it's just learning how to organize yourself and how to compartmentalize your life. It's a good tactic to have right now. And, you know, allowing yourself time to forgive yourself is also very, very important.
Thank you, Cecilia, for sharing that. You know, completely agree with what you mentioned about, you know, students seeking different avenues to get support. And, you know, with what you mentioned about, you know, learning how to multitask. I mean, I see yourself doing it right now, being with us here in this event and taking care of your little one as well. But I think what really resonated with me, what you said, is also being empathetic with yourself when you're not able to meet, maybe all the to-dos that you had for that day, and knowing that, it's okay. Like, I set my goals, I'll maybe work on this tomorrow. I'll have time to do it more so tomorrow. Maybe I didn't get to everything on my list, but I will get to it. That's something that I myself had to learn as a professional. And sometimes we try to kind of take on more and more, and kind of realizing what is doable and what will help us have a more balanced kind of life as well. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to go on here to the next question. So the next question, I'll first address it to Yulianna. And the question here is, have you experienced challenges in your current role or roles? If so, how did you navigate these challenges? What did you use to help you navigate? Any support system, outlets, etc.? I'll let you kind of take over there, Yulianna.
Okay, so I became the director of the STEM Diversity Office 5 years ago, but I did this the old school, old-fashioned way, which meant that I graduated with my bachelor's in Latin American Latino Studies and Biology in 2005. And at the end of that year, I ended up applying for a temporary position as a program assistant for the current job that I have. And so throughout the years, I basically, and gaining experience in what I was doing, and I became the program coordinator. And then 5 years ago, I took over the leadership of the office, right? So I think the major challenge that I have really faced, among which will be one of the things that we talk about, but imposter syndrome, is really in the division that I serve, which is the Division of Physical and Biological Sciences. I'm the only Latina director. And as the only woman of color, many times, so basically in a room of 35 leaders for the division, which are chairs of the departments and deans and assistant deans and associate deans, out of 35 people, I'm the only Latina in there, right? And then there's Cristina Ravello, who's a faculty who identifies as Latinx, but it's just the two of us, right? But I'm the only staff, and so many times just finding the courage to, at the beginning, it was really hard, right? So the challenge was really overcoming that feeling of feeling like you were the only one in the room, and the only one who really truly kind of understands the experience of multiple things, right? My identity is very complicated. I was undocumented till the age of 12, right? Which meant that I crossed the border multiple times, if you heard my life journey, back and forth. And so with that came a lot of shame for a long time, right? A lot of sort of somehow that you felt inferior, or that you weren't cut out to do this type of work. But in reality, what I've learned, and the challenge that I face is in being the only one, you end up speaking for everybody in your community, right? And it was a role that I started to realize how powerful it was, but also something that I had to overcome, just dealing with that fear and having to really address hard truths, right, about systemic racism. And when issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity get brought up in these meetings, at some point you become the person that everybody starts to turn to because you're expected to speak on these things. And so I think in that sense, that's been the challenge that I've had to overcome, is representing my whole community, is being the one person in that room that truly understands the experience from the students that I serve, from just speaking from my own experience. But I feel that in that sense, it also is shifted, right? Because I learned to really value and really gain power from my own story, and really use that as a mechanism of truth of what experiences we go through as students, in an educational system that's not really built for us, that in multiple ways tries to exclude you out, and really became that powerful voice to advocate, right? When I realized that I was the only one in the room, I learned to really channel that energy and to say, I am the only one in the room, and I was meant to be here, and there's a reason that I'm here, right? And then drawing from not feeling shame from my story and all the obstacles that I've had to overcome, because I understand what that is, right? Growing up low income, growing up undocumented for many years, having sort of this like it almost felt like a chip on my shoulder to becoming like just like a cape, right? Like, that's right, I overcame this and much more. And so I think that the hardest challenge for me was that it was just facing not having the adequate representation of leadership in the system, and then learning to really value my own story and using it as a point of strength and not weakness. And that's what I can share that has been the challenge. And so we need all of you to be out there to come into these positions of leadership, to take those seats. And so I'm always for fostering that development professionally, academically, and that's what I foster in my students and the students that I work with and my colleagues, right? Because there's still so much work to be done.
Thank you so much, Yulianna, for sharing. Super powerful. And, I agree. I think, I heard both kind of this feeling this responsibility of maybe being the only kind of Latina leader in this group, and feeling that you have to kind of speak for your whole community, but at the same time realizing that, hey, my story is powerful. My challenges have, made me who I am today, and not being ashamed of that, and seeing it more as a cape to be worn now, right? So thank you for sharing that. I'm also going to ask Cecilia to kind of share any insights you might have or experiences for this question. And again, the question was, have you experienced challenges in your current role or roles? If so, how did you navigate these challenges?
Yes. So I think that if I think in any career you take, you want to build a support system for yourself, especially as young professionals, and as you continue moving on, it takes a village, it takes an army for all of us to grow together. I don't think I would have been able to complete any of my education without the support of my family. And even now do the work that I'm able to do because of the support of my family. There's just some, and I'm not just talking about like my husband, but also like my extended family, my sisters, my brothers, my uncles, who've all supported me throughout this time. So one is always surround yourself with your village that helps uplift you, because it's from the littlest things that you might not think it's going to create a big of a difference, but childcare is so important, like especially for this current moment, childcare is so important. Like, and even just having my parents there to support me through that has been like, there's no price for the amount of support that they've provided. I mean, one of the challenges currently as my role as an community organizer with Debug, it's not within Debug myself, but it's within the system itself, the system that we're supporting families with. I mostly support families who come in contact with the criminal, immigration, or juvenile system. And some of the challenges has been to really change the narrative of what the outside world perceives us, community members who have had to face that system. Like, we're the other, we're the criminals, we're the marginalized folks. But really a barrier has been to push that narrative back. Like, we've seen it, and Teresa knows it, like within the county perspective, the immigrants' rights movement to pass the most progressive civil detainer policy within the country. It was, a push in itself. So getting system players to recognize us as human beings has been one of the most incredible challenges that we're still pushing through on a day-to-day basis. So I think, and I don't have a solution, but what we've been doing is just saying it over and over and over and over again to whoever needs to hear it, and standing up, rising up, to, joining a protest, joining a virtual rally. These are the little things that we could continue to do as a community to push back on that criminalized narrative that we've been, kind of forced upon. So that's been some the barriers that we've seen, just letting system players know that we deserve the same dignity, the same respect as everyone else, has been the overwhelming challenge that we've had to overcome. And we're not to sound defeated or anything, but we're pushing against it on a daily basis, and we'll continue to do that till I don't know when. We'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Cecilia, for that powerful message, and motivational as well for all of us to, again, continue pushing, right? There's still much change to be made, and always as a community, we're stronger. So I'm going to move on here to the next question. And this question I will address first to Rosanna. The question is, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? How did you overcome or manage those thoughts and feelings?
This has been on my mind quite a bit because folks ask all the time. And because I'm out here, trying to encourage people to tell our stories from our own perspective, a lot of people reach out because I'm very open to doing that. And so I have found that a lot of my mentorships happen in the same way, organically. And I've learned a lot about imposter syndrome. And it's been in the front of my mind this past weekend because due to several injustices about the indignity of which, our systems treat our gente, and knowing that I'm in all sorts of mitotes that are cross-sector, education, nonprofit, communications, and that my mind is always putting these connections together and that there's a consistent thread. And so I know the question is around imposter syndrome, but this weekend I had the biggest epiphany that I was like, I need to write this down, because I've talked about imposter syndrome on the podcast. I've talked to other mujeres about this sensibility of quién soy yo, who am I, to know this knowledge, to question these things, to ask for these things, to have the audacity to even have these questions at the table. And I came to the conclusion that imposter syndrome is a misnomer. It's not that we are experiencing imposter syndrome, it's that we're reacting and absorbing inadequate language and phrasings of how we're perceived. Because when I'm with myself, I know darn well that I know things. And I come from a long legacy of people who know things, whether it be in formal educational spaces or community. Our knowledge is vast, and it is so much about us, for us, because of us. And so when I think about imposter syndrome and the pain that it puts us through, because we start to absorb by force these narratives that we're force-fed about who we're supposed to be in the world, then that leaves me with the realization that it's not that we think we're imposters, it's that we're expected to believe that we're imposters in a multitude of spaces. And so even me in my role as a mom saying, I have questions about how we're handling distance learning. And then being dismissed because, oh, you're only a mom. And I'm like, Mom, my mom was only a mom in some people's eyes. And my grandmother was only a mom in several people's eyes. And yet I know that the impact of her work and the impact of their collective stories is so many things that drives me nuts. And then when you add on the layer of, okay, let me code switch so you can understand that the questions I'm asking come from your values of expertise, and you whip out, here's my credentials and my qualifications for asking these questions and 2 decades of experience facilitating and whatnot. And it's no wonder that I feel angry in this moment, because it's frustrating that so many people are having to sit here with ourselves and be like, why can't I overcome this imposter syndrome sensibility? And it's like, it's overcoming. We've already overcome, on our journeys to be even here having these questions with ourselves. It's that it doesn't matter what space you're in, and not to be like all gloom and doom, but just to be very, very, very realistic with naming the problem. The problem isn't that we think we're imposters. The problem is that we've internalized the idea that other people perceive us to be imposing on their lack of knowledge, their lack of ability to want to recognize us in our humanity, and their inability to value other people who are different from themselves. And that's a completely different thing. And so from my perspective, it's an issue of gaslighting our value to the point where it has a dollar amount differential. It's an issue of us really thinking, okay, you know, if this is the thing and we want to call it whatever we want to call it, how do I pull myself through? Because the fact is that doubt is there, right? Wherever it's stemming from, however we anchor it, however we unpack it, that doubt is there. And so I found that what pulls me through that moment is, you know, mis chingonas me respaldan. At the end of the day, I know that because I'm on this journey, not alone, and some familiar faces are even in this Zoom room right now, that when I am feeling that so intensely, and I can't even see my own insights into this, and I am just like, every day, every space I go into, this is an ongoing struggle that I'm tired of having. I remember, all right, Teresa's walking in. I'm good, I got this. Or timing is impeccable. Lily just sent me a message having nothing to do with the thing I'm going through. I've got this. And so I know at the end of the day, I've got this because we've got each other. In case in point, for a specific example in action, we've got a lot of issues going on with distance learning out here, especially with our Latino community in Gilroy specifically. And so what we did was we organized a protest. And then, you know, some people are like, we don't speak protest, we're deaf and blind to that. And if it's not in the news, it didn't exist. So then we did virtual town hall. Well, in the virtual town hall, we brought a range of chingonas who know things by mainstream standards, who are credentialed by mainstream dominant standards. And so while the critique was before, who are you to impose this demand for your dignity on us? It then became, oh, look at, they just brought in all these PhD people who are removed from community. And I'm like, one, their work is intimately tied to community because it is of us, for us, by us, about us all day. And the second thing is, you know, we can try to fit the molds of what all the books will say to do to get past imposter syndrome. And all we're doing is playing into a performance of an expectation. And so my whole critique in a nutshell is show up who you're gonna be, knowing that you're gonna feel that doubt because it's an intended hostile dynamic that's been targeted to you. And that you have people like me, you have people like Teresa, you have people like Sandra, Yulianna, Cecilia, everybody in this mix. If you reached out to us, it's an example, a window, a mirror, a door, a reflection of all of the ferocity you bring to the table. And some days you're gonna feel like an imposter, but at the end of the day, realize that that's coded language we've absorbed that has nothing to do with anything other than people's refusal to acknowledge who we are, regardless of what journey it took for us to be at the same table where they are. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Rosanna. Honestly, I think you nailed it there. I don't know if maybe others felt the same way, but I don't think I've heard it said better than the way that you said it. And honestly, I know you said you had an like kind of awe moment. I think you said yesterday or so. Just what you said right now was kind of an awe-inspiring moment to me, and a way that I had not thought of imposter syndrome. As someone who has felt that way, I didn't think of it as, you know, maybe I'm feeling this way because of what others have internalized or prescribed for me and who I may or may not be. And so, you know, I really appreciate you kind of sharing that awe moment, because I think it might be an awe moment for many of us here now. And just being able to see that, kind of shifting that mindset and how we view this and trying to overcome that. So thank you very much for that.
Can I throw in one more quick thing? I swear I'll keep it quick.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, oftentimes we show up and it's right, we're the only person there like us. That's true in a lot of spaces, but what I like to remind my students from the first day of class is take a second and acknowledge that, yeah, physically you're the only one in that space, but think about who are you and who do you carry with you into that space. So I might walk in and to everybody else, it looks like, here comes Rosanna by herself. Let's make her feel like an imposter. They might not have that conscious thought, but you know, the dynamic is there. And if I remind myself, you know what? I'm gonna put on this bold lipstick and my grandma's automatically with me in the room because I've summoned her in my own way. I'm going to collectively be conscientious and conscious and aware that I might be physically the only person like me there, but that I carry an entire community and the legacy and the responsibility, and in that way, disciplina, right? Of doing right by my community. And so if that means I'm reminding people that there is an entire world out there that they are excluding from the table, then fine, you know, but reminding myself, I am not here alone. As much as physically that might be the case, I am not here alone.
Thank you, Rosanna. And for this question, I was just going to see if Yulianna, if you had anything else you wanted to add in terms of, you know, your experience with imposter syndrome or overcoming some of these thoughts, feelings. If you do, we have a couple, you know, a minute or so if you'd like to share, or we can move on to.
I mean, I can share just something quick that is that I've sort of created my own personal mantra, and I think Rosanna did a really good job at just sort of the ways that I channel that energy is definitely knowing that I have a whole community standing behind me, right? And Cecilia also, you know, chimed into this, but the idea that you represent your family, I mean, up until this date, the reason that I'm able to be the best professional I am able to be is because my mom has been able to take care of my children, right? And that support has been so invaluable to make me the best leader that I can be, because I know that I carry that with pride, right? That in our culture, we celebrate family, and family is really important. And that's one of the ways that I feel that support. And when I walk into those rooms, although physically I am the only one, I am very well aware of who I'm representing, why I'm there, how much support I have. And that, on top of that, it's also the voices of the students, right? Because it's a collective voice. When I'm there, I'm not speaking just from my experience, it's speaking for the students and their countless stories and their genuine heart-to-hearts that they've shared with me. But as the way I overcome imposter syndrome is through a personal mantra, right? Specifically because I came from a very small town that is like 3,000 people. So like the size of a high school, and everybody knows everybody. I'm a believer in God, and I have a very strong faith, but it is, you know, I say a prayer that I say to God, and I say, if you would have wanted me to not be here, I could have just been at my hometown, and I could have happily raised children, maybe 10 children and goats and cows. But you decided that I would cross the border, that I'd be here. So really kind of elevating that sense of purpose, right? And so if you believe in a higher power, if you believe just in that natural ability of an energy that can fill you, that you can channel to sort of say you're meant to be where you're at. Because it doesn't happen by luck, you know. We're trained to think that it's like, and I see this all the time with my students, undermining their achievements one by one. It's like, I got lucky that I did this, I got lucky that I did that, but it stops being luck, right? At some point, it's really you and your talent that has gotten you thus far. And so once I'm able to channel that I've done so much to be where I'm at, you know, just thinking back about my journey, you know, I did a science major. I did undergraduate research in Iowa State. I did undergraduate research at UCSC. I danced 4 years at Folklorico with Lily, you know, so it's like I was an editor of Las Girlfriends, a safe space for women of color to really empower themselves through writing and share, you know, their journeys. And when I think back about all those experiences, I realized that I was actually forging the tools to be successful at what I was doing, right? And so I think that's what I would advise, right? That overcoming imposter syndrome is channeling that sense of purpose, and that you have to feel you belong. Nobody needs to tell you that. Like when you empower that feeling, like it doesn't matter who's in the room.
Thank you, Yulianna. I think that's a great way for, you know, those of us that might be experiencing that to channel it and to be able to kind of overcome that, whether it's a mantra or reminding ourselves that we have worked hard and we deserve to be there, and that our opinion and our perspective and our culture is just as valuable as anyone else in that room. And that, as Rosanna mentioned too, we have a legacy of other, you know, mujeres just as powerful probably in our life that we carry with us as well. So thank you both for sharing that. I'm going to move on here to our last question for our panelists, and you know, just so we kind of keep in time here with also allowing time for student Q&A. Just want to give a quick reminder to all of our attendees to make sure to complete the Google request form that is being shared in the chat box, and that's to help us track attendance for today's event. And also, again, make sure that if you have any questions that come up, feel free to include those in the chat box, and either if it's indicated for a particular panelist, to include their name. Thank you all for that. So here, our last question. I'm going to address it first to Teresa. And the question is, what would you say are the leadership strides Latinas have made up to this date? How do we or you affirm or encourage other Latina women?
I would say that I would like us to redefine leadership. And I think the way we define leadership in the society, and this is not our culture, this is a dominant culture, is that we wait for a Messiah to come save us. And then your own personal attributes is what makes you a leader. And I would like us to redefine leadership as in us as a community, and that everyone has leadership potential. And some people are given the opportunity and some people are not given that opportunity to exercise it. I've been part of a social movement. I'm a Chicana in an immigrant rights movement. And so I've had to look at this movement, and I've been in this immigrant rights movement for 30 years, and I've had to look at the civil rights movement that was over 100 years old, even though we focus on 10, 20 years of that movement to talk about it. And what I've had to realize is that it takes a long time to produce messiahs, and messiahs have to give up a lot. If you look at the lives of Cecilia Chavez and Martin Luther King, they gave a lot to do what they're doing. And what if we redefine leadership, that it is a community in which we step up and step back, in which we don't have to sacrifice everything we have in order to move things forward, and in which we support each other and trust each other and know that I can take a break and nothing bad will happen because I belong to a community where others will step up and step back. And that way you don't feel all this responsibility all the time. And that's my perspective as an organizer who is also part of the institutions. Sometimes I get to speak. Sometimes I don't get to speak. Sometimes I get to listen. And I think we have to be able to play the different roles, because reality is we're gonna make significant leadership change when the inside is pushing as hard as the outside. And we think that things just happen because they happen. They don't. They happen because we organized. And we have to be pushing in the same direction at the same time. So with that, I will say that in my leadership of being a Chicana working in the immigrant rights movement for 30 years, I've realized that as a community that lives in this space, we have more alike than we have difference. We live in the same space. We want the same things. Our kids are equally as important. We are all struggling with what's taking place, but we focus on the difference. So we focus on the language, on the skin color, on the history, on the income, on the academic achievements. And I think we have to focus on what's the same versus what is different. So in that context, obviously, you recognize that whether you're talking about my experience, Rosanna's experience, Cecilia's experience, and even Sotomayor's experience, who is the Supreme Court Justice, nothing has changed in the Latina experience at the university level in these last 50 years of looking at it. We all had the same struggle, and we all had the same challenges, and we all faced this I'm not enough because the institutions are not ready for us. And as a mother who sent her kids to college, I realized, oh shit, it's the same racism. Nothing has evolved, really. They're gonna face the same thing, even though their mother is college educated. And so I think key to all of this is the community building, the mentorship, the giving a hand up, the affirming to someone that they matter, because they face a whole damn day where no one's told them that they matter, where you may have been mistreated, but more likely you were ignored and no one even acknowledges your existence. And so I think key to all of this is the networks and the supports we give each other, and the way we find those shared values. Because I remember when my daughter was a teenager, she used to tell me, Mom, your problem is that you think all women are sisters. and there is no such thing as a sisterhood. There's a thing as women and people who have the same values, and that's why you support each other. You're not going to support each other just because you're all women. There's differences of class, there's differences of history, there's differences of education. And my response to her was like, damn, I hate it when you're smarter than me. No, I don't hate it, I love it. But yeah, she was telling me my truth. And I think that truth is realizing who your community is, realizing what your values are, and supporting each other in those endeavors. Because we're not going to always be the executive directors of something, but we can still make social change. We can still be in alliance. We can still support each other. And I think recognizing what has not changed is key, especially in this pandemic, where in general, you know, in this pandemic, some people are inconvenienced while others are sacrificing their lives on the daily. And so the opportunity for historical change that is taking place right now had not happened in 50 years. And so right now is time to take advantage of it. And key to all of it is our relationships and our organizing. Gracias.
Thank you, Teresa, for
Everything Teresa said, because I know you like called my name in there, so I'm gonna keep it 30 seconds because.
Oh, I was gonna ask you to go next, Rosanna.
I'm like, let's just get through it. You know, I agree with everything Teresa just said, and there's something about pointing out like values. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say, find people who are like-minded and work together. And I'm like, no, you know, and I don't know if that's because I come from being the firstborn in a family of 9, and you cannot get not even 3 kids in my own household right now to agree on lunch. So you're going to be hard pressed to just focus on like-minded, and you do yourself a disservice, because when you emphasize the values, you can bring together so many collective minds who might disagree on how and what specifically, but if you can work through that toward the values, then it helps elevate so many of us in ways that we ourselves see fit, right? And so in addition to questioning how we even frame leadership, the fact is that oftentimes I'll hear my younger students say, we don't have Latina leaders to look up to. And I'm like, whoa, who broke you? And who broke you is erasure in real time, because what'll happen is we'll have phenomenal women in a room, and automatically you'll see folks trying to rewrite what's happening in that very room in that moment to discredit what's being done or what's being said or the expertise there. And so part of that leadership also includes knowing where we come from collectively and where we are, right? And we know that in this particular valley, in this particular county, we have a tremendous amount, by mainstream standards, so many Latina leaders doing the things, leading the work, shaping the daily fight, and that we disagree amongst ourselves on a lot of things. And at the end of the day, we're in it for a same set of values that include dignity and community and justice and all of those great things that are worth pushing for. And then that a part of that leadership is also reminding each other, like Teresa said, you can step back, you can take a break, because when we know our history and we hear from so many folks in an older generation that are like, I burnt myself out and I didn't take care of myself, and I'm now in financial straits where we got to do a GoFundMe to save some of our most vibrant poets who are a part of so many of our own stories. That's a problem. And so in addition to questioning how we collectively define leadership, it's taking a step to really think and look and pay attention to the leadership that is currently there, because it's there and our stories are actually written and archived, but they're hidden. And I think that in large part that might be by design and on purpose by folks who we have to fight to even value our stories enough to merit publication, right? And so paying attention, being vigilant in terms of seeing the leadership in action. And I think that's a critical reason why I'm so invested in the work we do, not just in the magazine, but in the podcast, because I'm like, okay, if it's such a struggle to even get the news to cover what we're doing, or to get publishers to say, yes, I will invest in this because it makes sense and it's a story that needs to be told, then fine, we'll pick up those just in the spirit of everyone else before us. We're going to create our own channels of communication that are accessible in spaces that aren't just academic, but out in community as well, because it's important that we know that we do indeed exist as recognized leaders, even by mainstream standards.
Thank you, Rosanna and Teresa. Couldn't agree more with you both. We'll go ahead, and that's kind of the end of our facilitated panel discussion. But again, thank you to you all for sharing some great, personal stories, perspectives, insights. I think, I don't know I'm hoping the rest of our attendees also have felt more empowered just through your shared experiences. We're gonna go ahead and move along now to the student Q&A portion of our event today. And again, I'll just remind students, any that maybe just logged on a couple minutes ago, to please fill out the Google request, the Google form, which is our way of tracking attendance for today's event. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to Dylan from Student Involvement, who will be facilitating the student Q&A portion for today.
Hello, thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you to all the panelists for that excellent discussion. We definitely appreciate all of the great insight and feedback and wisdom that you've shared so far. And fortunately, we've got some great questions from our audience. So a question for all of the panelists is, how can folks who identify as Latinx and first-generation students help support and mentor upcoming Latinx students? And for those who are in the San Jose area, do you know of any, maybe local organizations or activities going around? Anybody in California or nationwide, any initiatives that maybe some folks can get connected to if they're interested in helping that mentorship?
You know what? I always, especially for college students right now, in the initial phases of your development, the Latina Coalition is a pretty good gathering place of local folks, and they have programming in place that supports that as well. But a lot of my mentorships have been gained by way of like that organic connection that I feel like this draw towards certain people. And I think this panel earlier on, it came up that, sometimes asking is critical as a skill. And I have had people reach out to me and say, hey, I saw you at such an event. I found your information on LinkedIn. Can I reach out to you? And I'm like, yes, definitely, right? And so even just having the audacity to ask someone that you feel connected to organically is a fair way to go about it. Reaching out to your professors, that's the value of office hours. You get to figure out how that works. Some of the people here represent a lot of orgs, and so even like Debug, I like the work they're doing. I want to connect as a human being, and that, can lead to so many adventures, mentorship-wise or other, right? So thinking of beyond the scope of like the officially structured mentorship spaces, because those feel more like networking, and they don't always yield mentorship. So just keeping that in mind, I think, is helpful to remind ourselves.
I would also add, get involved in what interests you. I mean, find out if that's something you would like to work on. I think part of the struggle with education is it's so detached from reality sometimes that you need to find a space and a purpose for your education. And getting involved in the local community organizations, whether it's women's groups, immigration groups, labor, whatever it is that you're interested in, if you get involved in something, you find out, oh, maybe that's something that I'd like to explore more. That's something I'd like to contribute to. And I think one of the things that happens is that we isolate the student population of, oh, learn now, grow now, study now. But you also need to be in community to be able to understand the purpose of your education, because sometimes the suffering is so great that you lose the idea of what its purpose is.
Great, thank you all. Our next question is addressed to all panelists as well. And the student would like to know, in leadership, how do you handle the extra barrier of being a woman in leadership? And some other folks also helped expand upon that question, talking about being a double minority, the issues of the wage gap coming up, and intersectionality and everything kind of all bubbled into that. So does anybody have any thoughts or comments to address that question?
Well, I would say it's still the challenges we're facing. If you look at the women's movement, we're in a really bad place. Whether it's women having their children taken away from them, whether it's women being sterilized, whether it's women being unfairly incarcerated, whether it's women having their partners and their children incarcerated, there is a lot of work to be done. And it is in together and in community that we're going to change things. Obviously, as an individual who is college educated, I do have privilege because I have a master's and a BA. Education does open doors. It doesn't change society though. We change society as organizers and as a community. And so I feel like we had the 1960s and then there was kind of this really big pause. And then we've been organizing for the next 40 years and all of a sudden it's coming to fruition in the context of this pandemic. So there is a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of ways to be engaged. There is a lot of ways to further women's agenda. And a lot of times the women's agenda is in the context of family and children because we're still the people who are the people who are responsible. Yes, there are progressive men and I happen to be married to one, but in general, it's women who are carrying the family and it's women who are still left behind and it's women who are trying to make ends meet and it's women who are being the co-teachers right now as we're doing distance learning. So we have a lot to do. We have a lot to talk about. And in the Office of Women's Policy, they had this little sign that I took a picture of that said, "We've made history, now let's make progress." And I think that is key because we kept getting stuck in history, the first one, and then what has structurally changed?
Great, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on the panel about that? Handling the extra barrier of being a woman in leadership?
I guess I can add to, there was a second part to that question about has the wage gap ever come up and how do you address it? In my role, I think it was basically realizing that other colleagues were getting paid more, right? And so the way I addressed that was by throwing my name in the hat and applying to other jobs and really just putting my name out there with all the work that I had done and really believing that I was worth more, right? And that I deserved to get paid more. And it did happen for me. I got multiple job offers and I came back to my campus and I said, but it was not a made up threat. I said, I will make a decision within 1 week to leave the campus, and the campus had to rethink how much I was worth, right? But I had genuine numbers to say how much my work was worth out there, right? So I think in many cases, you first have to believe you're worth more. That starts from you, and then you have to throw your name in the hat for other opportunities. And you can't be scared because we get comfortable. That's one of the things that happens. We get comfortable and we know what we do, and everything that we know, your colleagues, your students, you get so attached. But at the same time, one of the things that started to happen is that if in mentoring, I can't say you have to know your worth when I'm not acknowledging mine, right? And so I have to sort of walk the walk and be able to mentor with that truth and that belief that it can be done and that you have to challenge, right? And so that's what I'm going to recommend, that when you start feeling that you need to get paid more, do something about it. Recognize your own worth, because nobody's going to just give you more money for what you already do. And if you do it well, that's not going to happen. And it's been said multiple times, but we are more than qualified for the multiple positions and roles that we take, right? And many times we bring even more to the table because we're willing to go above and beyond, right? And we have to recognize that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Another topic that's come up a good bit today and has been active in the chat is this idea of imposter syndrome and not feeling like you really belong in any specific space. So a question that we received was to all panelists, if anybody is able to expand on specific memories or experiences related to feeling like you don't belong in a space, and any, maybe specific tools or resources you were able to use to help get over that feeling.
Y'all know in the movies where they're like, you can't sit with us, and it's always these mean girls, and then at the end of the movie you realize nobody ever really wanted to sit with them anyway. Honestly, at its most basic sensibility, sometimes that's what gets me through. And I think a lot of what Teresa said about how our systems are set up to really be oppressive. It's beyond that sometimes that they're targeting some of us in certain ways, right? And so a lot of times I just, not just because it's a Herculean effort for sure, but reminding myself, okay, this system was set up historically with an objective in mind, and through the years has had to change by force and demand and the will of the people who now occupy those tables. But there are times where I'm like, okay, I'm the only one like me in here, and I don't want to fit in with this particular group, and anchoring myself fully by remembering the spaces and the people that I do fit in with. And sometimes they don't come from the ethnic backgrounds that I do, so it's not just about that. But again, having those values in mind and knowing that every time I'm at a table where I am feeling like the odd person out, I don't approach that with this like unicorn sensibility that I'm somehow special. I remember that that's by design, and there's an entire history and background of even my own community giving up on themselves and saying, like, it was to the point where when I was going to high school, if I was trying to be the cool kid with them, they'd be like, go to school or we're gonna beat you. And I'm like, wow, that's a great way to motivate me. But what they were trying to say in that moment, and what conversations we've had later as grown folk, is that, yeah, growing up, we absorb this idea that we don't belong in these spaces. So it's beyond imposter syndrome for sure. And then what happens is, because other people stop investing in us, then we lose hope in ourselves. And what I benefited in a weird way from that dynamic is that folks then put their hopes onto me. And that was a lot of responsibility to carry, but it's one that I still carry to this day. And I make darn sure that even when I'm in that space, I'm remembering, okay, my comadre Donna got pushed out by design. We know exactly the story behind that. She makes more money than me now, but guess what? Her voice is here with me at this table. And there are some things that, when I was growing up, didn't understand about our dynamic, but have served me well in terms of carrying that in as a sensibility and an energy into that space. So again, anchoring myself in the communities where I am a part of, in order to get through that 1 or 2 hour meeting where I just want to gouge my eye out because I clearly do not belong in that space, but I will not sacrifice my seat at that table at that particular moment, because it's not about me at that table, it's about my entire community and the translation in some ways that I'm able to offer in that space. And sometimes you just got to suffer through it, and it sounds like a terrible thing to do, but it's because you've got this entire community that's more than resilient, right? That does help you thrive in the bigger context of things. So keeping that bigger context in mind is ultimately what I think I'm saying here.
And I would add, if you're feeling that way, maybe check in with yourself, because I don't think it means you're an imposter. I think it means you're really tired. I think it means you need to rest. I think it means the institution is getting to you, and what are you going to do to sustain your health? Because I do agree with what has been previously said from Rosanna, is that it's created to place a burden on us and to create insecurity, and you're not enough. But if it's working on you, it means pay attention.
Great, thank you both for that. And our final question that I'm seeing in the chat, but we still have some time, so feel free to add if anybody does have any more questions. But the last question we've got right now is, again, addressed to all panelists. Did any one of you struggle during your last year as an undergraduate student figuring out what's next? Trying to figure out how to use that degree your parents put to do for you to obtain? Sorry, I personally felt scared and lost at career fairs because I'm usually the only Latina there in the middle of males. So again, that idea of really struggling, it's their final year in undergrad, not really sure what to do next, trying to find that path forward.
So I will say that I was so unprepared that I was a fifth-year college student, and I said, I better get out of here. What do I have the most classes in? And that's what I'm majoring in. And I think I was one of the first ones in UC Santa Cruz to argue that Chicano studies was part of Latino studies, because it was not at that point. I think that as Latinos, Mexicanos, Chicanos, we know we're going to work no matter what. And so I think it's really key that you find what are your interests in, you know, what calls you, what moves you, because we spend too much time at work and trying to make ends meet to not be inspired with what we do. And we are privileged if we're at that point where we're finishing school. And then it took me another year to write my damn thesis that I got honors in. But I think it's a challenge that we face because obviously many of our family members have not gone through this. And now you got to prove your worthiness to your community, to your family, and to everybody else. So I think being nice to yourself, being kind to yourself, giving yourself space to do internships so that you can figure out, hey, what interests me? And I think the value of an internship too is, oh, that does not interest me. I don't want to do that. So I think those are some ways that it can be helpful, and networking, obviously. And even interviewing other women, hey, what did you do and what did you like about it?
I think I'll just jump in a little bit. I think it's natural to feel, you know, what's next as just, you know, thinking about your career, or even not knowing what your career is going to be. Like, I never thought about becoming a community organizer as part of my work in life, you know. Like, really at a really young age, I always thought, oh, I want to be a police officer. And then, you know, I saw a lot of my family members getting me, you know, with the law, and I was like, oh, never mind, that's not what I want to do. Plus, then I was undocumented, so kind of hit that head on and was like, you can't become that. So, you know, I think allowing yourself to think, like I said it before, I think it's a natural feeling to not knowing what's next. Even now, me, like, you know, I'm 31 years old, and I still feel that there's still more that I could do. You know, I love what I do at Debug. I think I will be with Debug, I don't know, till I die probably, but I still wonder, and because this expectation that you have to continue proving your worthiness because you're college educated, like that you're supposed to be, or I don't know, this is just my feeling, but you're supposed to be on this pedestal that, you know, you need to continue growing and growing and growing. And that's, you know, at times I feel that, like, I know I'm supposed to be doing more with my life, like I'm capable of doing more, and I'm pretty sure I am, but allowing ourselves to allow that transition in our life is critical. You know, when I finished my undergraduate, I took a year off from school, and for me it was, I'm a lifelong student. I need to go back to school because all I've known is how to study, you know, and study and work. And there was this emptiness in me where I was like, I need to continue to go back to school, which is why I went back to school to get my master's degree with a 1-year-old to just continue, you know, escalating. And does my degree help in what I do? I think it definitely does, but it doesn't define who I am. Like, it's not a paper that, you know, I have in my desk that says, oh, I'm qualified to do X, Y, and Z. No, what qualifies me to do what I do are my life experiences. You know, the interactions that I have with my community, the community that I represent, the community that I bring in, the perspective, the values, everything. That's what qualifies me to do the work that I do on a daily basis. So I think education is definitely super important, but just allow yourself some time to really just, follow your passion. My passion has always been, supporting my community. I knew I wanted to do something with law. I took some, law courses, and, I just figured, I don't know if I'll become an attorney. I think I still have time to explore that idea at some point. But for right now, I'm happy where I'm at. I get to do what I love on a daily basis, which is support and connect with my community. Build leaders out of the people who you wouldn't, consider to be a leader. Like, my proudest moment in the past 2 weeks has been to teach this, 68-year-old man how to use Zoom. Like, I am so proud of that now I just send him the Zoom link, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna have a meeting right now. That's, for me, that's been the proudest moment in the past 2 weeks. So, I know there's these questions about what's next, but gravitate to what you love, and that's going to guide you through, to the next, to your next step. I think that's just the way I think.
And I'm leaving this meeting really soon because I got to go meet with my boss, but I would be remiss if I didn't share this quick little tidbit. And the tidbit is this, that sometimes people cling to where a certain goal that they had. For me, once I said in kindergarten, I want to be a lawyer or a teacher or a realtor, it was like, my parents were like, a lawyer, yes, that is going to be, why we sacrificed. And I absorbed that. And so I was one track mind. I'm going to be an attorney. Went through Santa Clara University, majored in political science. And I was like, I'm going to law school. Took a year off, studied for the LSAT, took the LSAT, went to USF for law school. And I hated it. And I hated it from day two. Probably hated it even before day two, but that's when I first admitted to myself, like, what did I do? And I'm here, so I might as well suck it up and finish. And I would wake up screaming. And, my boyfriend, now husband, was like, you really hate it. And I'm like, I know, but I have to do it. And then we ended up going to Mexico, and we were there, and it was quiet, and nobody was telling me what I had to do. And I had time to think and reconcile with myself what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was not that. So much so that I knew that I was daydreaming during class when I was like, this is not the space for me. And it was always what I was going to do when I retire from being an attorney. And so when I was at this rancho in Mexico, I was like, what in the heck am I doing? I can't do this. And I reached out to a mentor who had supported me in this whole process. And Cindy said to me, Mija, sometimes you got to admit that, failure is an option, and that it's not you failing, it's you making a choice, and it's you eliminating choices from your life. And that sacrifice that your parents made was so that you could have that choice. And so sometimes you're not going to know your last year of college what your life is going to look like, because you can't even imagine the options available to you. And so by the time I left law school, and then I went and got married a year later, and then I had a child a year later, and then I was like, Chicana Studies, I must apply to this master's program. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that. And people told me, what are you going to do with that? Nothing. It's not going to be useful. And they couldn't be any more wrong, because that is my life. Like, every framing I bring is from that perspective. So all that to say, so I can log off and go and talk to my boss from that same department now, is I would have never at that moment imagined, oh my God, in X many years, I'm going to be teaching at the university in that department, making all this mitote happen in Gilroy and bringing people some good trouble. I would have never been able to imagine that. So I think being open to pivot and being compassionate with yourself and relying on your who have been in those trenches and grappled with these conversations with ourselves, and letting yourself have permission to, let go of the plan sometimes, and just find some answers in spaces where it's not always go, go, go. And so, speaking of the go, 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 ya me voy. But it was a pleasure. Thank you all so much. I'll see you all soon.
I would like to thank all of you for, especially the 4 mujeres who were on this panel and who were really, thoughtful in their responses. And, sharing all the knowledge and information and the experiences that you all have lived to ensure that, our students and that we can also learn from your experiences. Everything was just so valuable. So thank you very much. And I wanted to remind all the students on the call today that, all these mujeres are local to the San Jose, Santa Clara area. If you resonated with something they said, or maybe you're interested in the career path that they took, I highly encourage you to connect with them and stay connected. They have a lot to share. And before we end, and I know to our speakers and panelists, if you need to hop off, and I completely understand, since we had this event until 2:30. We'll be wrapping up the event, and we'll have Sandra de Leon return and share a little bit more about the Career Center and different resources available to you on campus. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Elisa. And I want to also thank again all our panelists for today. Just honestly, your insight, your advice, your personal stories were very inspirational, powerful, and just encouraging. So thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. We truly appreciate it. And now for just kind of closing up here and wrapping up, I just want to share with all our student participants here just a few information regarding the Career Center and how we can support you. So just wanted to kind of let you all know the different ways that we support students with. So whether you're looking to whether you're still exploring what major you want to select, or you're trying to figure out what career path you want to pursue. I know there was some students mentioning in the chat box maybe of not being sure what career they might want to pursue after graduating. And trust me, I was that student. So definitely empathize with that, and be happy to chat with any of you that might be at that, stage in your career development. Or, also some of the other topics we help students with is, reviewing your resume, cover letter, if you're now getting ready to apply to particular jobs or internships you're interested in, how to go about building relevant experience while you're here at SJSU, looking for, again, those internships or job opportunities. And we understand that right now, just given the current situation we're in, it is more challenging, but, I could definitely talk to you about how to strategize. With that goes, also talking about networking, as it has been shared by, some panelists too. The networking piece is super crucial, seeking out mentors or professionals in the field who can give you advice and possibly help you through your career journey. Another topic that we help students with is preparing for interviews. We do mock interviews, and we also talk to students about exploring graduate school, if that's something you're considering as well. And I'll move along here. I'm not gonna go over all of these, but just wanna highlight briefly that we do have a lot of career apps available to you all, and these are free. You log in using, for the most part, your SJSU OneID and password. Some that I'll highlight are VMOC, which is our online resume tool where you can upload your resume in PDF format and get instantaneous and personalized feedback. We also have SJSU Handshake, which some of you might be familiar with already, where you can look for jobs, internships, see what events we have coming up, including our virtual career fairs for this semester. SJSU Squared is our mentoring app where you could connect with professionals or alumni, possibly in your field of interest. And then Focus 2, if you're kind of, as I mentioned, unsure about your career or major, it's a great exploration tool. And Big Interview helps you practice your interview skills. And those you can access through our website. And then just quickly here, want to share the calendar for our virtual job and internship fairs. As you can see here, today we actually had our STEM undergrad job and internship fair. And then we will be having our STEM grad fair, which was by invitation only, followed by our business and then health job and internship fair. You're welcome to kind of take a screenshot. You can also access the dates through our website as well. And then I won't kind of go over this for sake of time, since I know we are a bit past the 2:30 mark here, but I did want to share with you all our virtual kind of events, educational events that we have coming up, and webinars. Some of these already took place earlier this semester, but for example, you can see here that we will be having a virtual interviewing workshop coming up October 5th. You know, we understand that given the situation right now, employers that are hiring are having interviews taking place in a virtual environment. So, you know, if that's something you're interested in, check out the upcoming events for this semester. And then just want to quickly let you all know how you can connect with myself. Again, I'm here to support you all with your career development. And I mentioned some of the different topics that I help students with. I'd be glad to, you know, help you all, you know, given wherever you might be in your career journey. And just want to let you all know that I do have virtual drop-ins, you know, with the Chica Next Latinx Student Success Center, and those are Wednesdays, every Wednesday, 1:30 to 3:30. And so I'm logged on to Zoom, and it's just first come, first serve. Sessions are about 20 minutes, and you can access the link through the link tree /centro_SJSU. If that drop-in time doesn't work with your schedule, you can also submit a Google request form, and then I will follow up with you to schedule an appointment based on your availability. My contact information is also listed on there, sandra.deleon@sjsu.edu, and as well as the Career Center website. All right, and then I think that's it for me, but thank you all for being here. And I think maybe Dylan might be going over this in regards to student involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sandra. So yeah, I'll just briefly talk about the Leadership Stories initiative from Student Involvement. This is a new program we're doing where we are collecting short video responses from students just like y'all. And this month's question is about National Latino Hispanic Heritage Month. So our question is, are there any Latinx leaders who have inspired you or impacted your life? So could be one of the panelists today, could be anybody. So yeah, you can just click that link and share a 30, 60-second video of your response, and we'll clip them all together and publish a nice video on our social media and website. So if you're interested, please use that link. I also put it in the chat. And besides that, yes, thank you to everybody today. I don't know if Elisa or anybody had any other final thoughts, but we appreciate you all attending and hope you had some great takeaways from today. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending the Si Se Puede Latinas in Leadership event. The panelists had a lot of great insight, and something they did share was the importance of asking for help and reaching out when you need help. And Centro is one of those one-stop shops that can connect you to the Career Center, student involvement, and other departments on campus whenever you need help. So if you want to reach out to Lily or myself, I know I saw Lily had dropped our email addresses earlier, or you can visit our website for more information. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your semester.